December 3, 2002, began like any other sunny afternoon in Modesto, California, until a frantic 911 call shattered the calm. "My husband's missing, and I think something terrible has happened to our baby." The highly publicized trial revealed a husband's deadly secrets, thrust the Petersons into the nation's unforgiving spotlight, and turned a small farming community into the backdrop of one of America's most sensational murder cases. Scott and Laci Peterson appeared at first glance to embody the American dream. A handsome, charismatic insurance salesman, Scott had a promising career and a modest income, while Laci, a 24-year-old graduate student, was pregnant with their first child, a daughter they named Aubrey. They lived in a modest home on a quiet cul-de-sac, their lives intertwined with friends, family, and a tight-knit community that celebrated birthdays and barbecues as if they were rites of passage. Yet beneath that veneer lay cracks that would soon widen into a chasm of suspicion, media frenzy, and courtroom drama. On the night of August 13, 2002, Laci was reported missing after she failed to show up for work at her law firm. The following day, a search began, and the case quickly escalated into a massive manhunt, with volunteers, law enforcement, and even the National Guard combing the Sacramento River and its tributaries. On December 24, 2002, the remains of a fetus, later identified as Laci's unborn child, were discovered in the San Francisco Bay. In April 2003, a fisherman pulled up a torso from the same waters, which forensic experts confirmed as Laci's. The physical evidence seemed indisputable: a body in the water, a missing wife, and a husband who claimed to have been fishing alone on the night of her disappearance. From the moment the first pieces fell into place, suspicion coalesced around Scott. Investigators discovered that he had taken out a $250,000 life insurance policy on Laci just days before her disappearance, a policy that would have paid out to his name if she died while pregnant. Moreover, a pair of tires found near a remote road, later linked to the Petersons' vehicle, raised questions about where Scott might have driven that fateful night. Witnesses recalled seeing Scott on his fishing trips, but also noted that his alibi was flimsy, and his behavior in the weeks following Laci's disappearance was eerily calm. The media, hungry for drama, painted him as a coyote who had lured his wife to a remote spot, only to betray her in a cold, calculated act. The trial began on August 21, 2004, in the courtroom of San Mateo County, under a glare of national attention that rivaled any high-profile political hearing. The prosecution, led by Deputy District Attorney Christopher M. Cates, presented a narrative built on circumstantial evidence, forensic findings, and the emotional weight of a grieving mother's family. They argued that Scott had motive, financial gain, and an affair with a woman named Amber Frey, who testified that Scott had confided in her about wanting to be free from his marriage. They painted a picture of premeditation, pointing to the life insurance policy, the timing of the trip to the fishing spot, and the fact that the crime scene, Laci's body submerged in the bay, matched a location Scott had visited just weeks earlier. The prosecution's star witness, a former friend of the Petersons, recounted hearing Scott's voice on a cell phone call that night, claiming it sounded rushed and nervous. The defense, spearheaded by attorney Mark Geragos, countered with a strategy of reasonable doubt. He emphasized the lack of direct physical evidence linking Scott to the crime scene. The murder weapon was never found. No DNA or blood matched Scott to Laci's remains, and the prosecution's key pieces, such as the tires, were argued to be coincidental. Geragos painted Scott as a loving husband, a victim of a tragic accident, perhaps a misadventure that turned catastrophic. He brought in expert witnesses to challenge the prosecution's forensic conclusions, suggesting that the tide and currents could have moved the bodies from an unknown location, not necessarily where the Petersons' boat had been. The courtroom became a theater of emotion. Laci's family sat in the front row, eyes red from sleepless nights, while the nation watched through television screens. The trial lasted 8 months, with more than 200 witnesses testifying and countless hours of evidence presented. The jury, sequestered for weeks, was tasked with navigating a labyrinth of circumstantial facts, conflicting testimonies, and an overwhelming media narrative. On November 12, 2004, after 12 hours of deliberation, the verdict was read: guilty on both counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Laci and her unborn son. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Scott Peterson, expressionless, was led away in handcuffs, his future now sealed by the gavel's strike. The sentence that followed was death by lethal injection, a punishment that would later become a focal point in California's evolving stance on capital punishment. The aftermath rippled far beyond the courtroom. Laci's family, once a private, grieving circle, became public advocates for missing person reforms, lobbying for better coordination among law enforcement agencies and increased resources for families in crisis. The case also sparked intense debate over the media's role in shaping public perception, with critics arguing that the relentless coverage turned a courtroom into a circus, potentially influencing jurors and witnesses alike. Amber Frey, thrust into the national spotlight, later authored a memoir detailing her experience, shedding light on how manipulative relationships can be weaponized in high-stakes investigations. Subscribe to The Verdict for more stories like this.